And you sent out the message? Okay, mic check. Everything looking fine on the volumes? Fantastic. Welcome everybody for joining with us this evening here, a Thoughtful Thursday in the Raw Revelation store, surrounded by all the wonderful superfoods and everything that we have here tonight. I happen to be enjoying a very extremely delicious latte fix, so I hope everybody has at least tried the latte fix in the last little bit of time since that's shown up. Uh, very delicious drink, well blended. Um, we are broadcasting, so anybody who's actually participating tonight, just to let you know, you guys are going to be famous after this evening. So I do congratulate and enjoy the fact of everybody giving as much as they can whenever we go to questions and answering throughout the entire discussion. So that's very amazing. If you're joining with us online and you're putting in any orders for any of the products mentioned or anything else in general, use the coupon code SMART10 when you go to checkout. That will help you be able to get a 10% discount. So we'd love to thank you for joining with us as we go through, and of course everybody here who's in store. Anything you get this evening as we do these Thoughtful Thursdays and expand our health education, we're giving that wonderful 10% off as well too. We will be announcing the code later. Oh yes. People on the phone or yep, yep, exactly. So we'll go ahead. Everyone probably heard you say that. So our discussion tonight's Heal Thy Thyroid. This is a very interesting and very heartfelt sort of place to kind of begin if this is the first step in your health journey. It might be the thing that's finally caused you to really take a look at yourself, your behaviors, patterns, diet, nutrition, supplements, things of that nature to figure out how can I possibly get my body to heal this particular issue. First thing I'm here to tell you is it is possible. That's something that not a lot of people hear, and that's a big first step in this process. Need something to drink, Sandra? Yeah. Michael, grab you something. No, don't worry about it. So we really do hope that everybody here can understand that wherever you are in your process, no thyroid issues, trying to heal through some sort of diagnostics, thinking that essentially you're hopeless and it's never going to have any kind of solution. That's not true. There's always something to do. Always something to kind of go at in terms of getting your body back into better health. So we begin each week with our 30 seconds of doing conscious breathing and 30 seconds of empty space in order to allow for this 1 minute meditation to be the beginning of your nice Thursday and how to prepare yourself for the next hour worth of material here. So just make sure, are you okay? Good? Are you sure? Okay. Yeah. So as we go through this process, for anybody who's joining, catching us for the first time, we do 7 seconds of a long inhalation, holding, and then we do 8 seconds of a deep exhalation, and we repeat that twice. And then we'll have just 30 seconds of nothing, just openness for the time to kind of reset everything before we begin and go further. So please join me in actually making sure you're concentrating on expanding the diaphragm and getting your actual breathing to be able to work for you and actually get that first time of really good deep breath. So 7 seconds of breath in. Holding for a few seconds. 8 seconds of breath out. All the way down to nothing. And 7 seconds of breath in. Holding. And 8 seconds of breath out. Just 30 seconds of nothing. All right. Thank you so much. Like I say, I hope that felt as good for everybody else here as it did for me, because that's the best way to get this thing started. So as we're going through this discussion, and I like to start with, of course, beginning to expand on the education for people who may not have paid attention during their original and science classes, their human phys, if they actually went that deep, and just understanding what we're talking about, because I think that's almost the first key critical piece in hearing how to heal, is that we got to know what's there, why is it not working, and how do we get it back? So you'll see that stepwise process as we go through our talk today. So thyroid function, it's unique. Do we actually kind of understand what we're going after when it comes to operation here? Um, I call the thyroid gland the grand central station of the human body. It's the controlling, sensing, interpreting, and directing organ that actually, goes through a process of sending the proper signals through the blood to the organs, to organelles, to have them do their job properly. So that's why this is such a broad spectrum issue when you have thyroid dysfunction, because it affects every other body system. And it's just varying degrees of effectiveness of dysfunction that's occurring inside the human body. So when it comes to the idea of sensing, one thing I want people to understand about this is that every 17 minutes, the entire blood volume that you carry inside your body passes through the thyroid gland. Your thyroid senses things like sugar levels, stress outside the body, internal heat, how much red blood cells, if you've been cut and you're bleeding, all of these things. And it's the controlling organelle that actually will direct everything else to respond. So if there's too much blood sugar in the blood volume, it'll tell the pancreas time to step up some insulin. If there's actually a little too much in the stomach cavity, it'll say hydrochloric acid, get to work, let's break this food down. If you're a person who's running around in the hot sun and your body temperature is getting too high, it's what creates the perspiration, gets the thymus gland activating to regulate that. It's that homeostasis organelle. It's receiving signals from all of the visceral organs, all the digestive cavity organs, as food's being processed, nutrients are being uptake in order to actually tell the brain organelles what's going on and how to respond. So when it comes to stress, when it comes to relaxation, when it comes to going through all these steps in these processes, it's that governing body piece of operation. Maybe it's something in the air starting to catch. Um, so it's unique because when we go through this concept, going through this concept of the sensing, that's that beautiful piece where this is a delicate work, and that's something that you got to understand. We're going through a very wide spectrum of different hormones, different compounds, and the thyroid has to stay on top of this process. Anything in dysfunction will start to sort of create the cascade effect, and you'll start to see failings in other areas. So I talk about interpretation or interpreting. It's unique because it's actually telling the body or the system better than any kind of CBC testing what's normal or not normal for your body. So if you're a person who's actually having any excess issues, any body changes that are occurring, it's going to say higher or lower and actually make that decision as to telling the other organelles what to do and how to respond. So it's unique that when you have thyroid dysfunction and you're a person who is high anxiety, then your body is going to interpret all systems of environmental response as being extreme or and increasing the overall hormones that are responding there as well too. If you're a person who hops into a car and regardless of how deep traffic is and is already angry at everybody else on the road, there's interesting issues that are going on inside the body creating that anger, and how your body's responding to the stimulus around you. This is the same thing for actually working with the what you're eating and how you're eating, to know exactly where to increase digestion. If you're having trouble, you're not experiencing a very good colon path. The unique thing is that leaky gut syndrome is one of those very commonly exacerbated problems when it comes to, and it's a lot of times what's recharging hypothyroidism, because you're actually getting toxins produced inside the blood cavity. The body doesn't really know how to deal with them outside of the colon wall, and so the blood becomes toxic and the thyroid's just trying to clean everything up. So this interpretation phase is actually one where we don't understand how many different trillions of cells are making decisions, and that thyroid gland is doing the third phase, which is more the directing. So it's actually the one setting the standards. So it's unique when we talk about depression and being able to actually not have proper sleep function and having interruptions occurring inside these more large body processes in order. Even our skin issues, and our immune system and hormone base begins in the actual terms that are occurring inside that thyroid gland. As we go through and kind of go into what we're going to talk about next when we come to the more symptomatic sort of disruptions of all of this, that's where we're going to see how this process of interrupting these three phases, the sensing, the interrupting, and the directing, that all of a sudden other issues start developing inside the human body. So it's very critical to know what we're dealing with when it comes to even trying or attempting to heal it. And that's one of the big things I find is that with the modern medical care system, there's really not even almost a consideration as to what other effects there could be in a body as to how it's going to be affecting the rest of the system. It's just, that's your thyroid gland, it's not working, let's fix the thyroid gland, when there's actually other body organelle issues that are occurring in different phases of this. So it brings me to my first question to kind of get something from everybody here in the room. What is it that we know or we've experienced as to be toxic to the actual thyroid? So it's unique because I'd like to get kind of an interpretation for everybody here to make sure that you kind of know a little bit about what we're dealing with when it comes to this sort of operation. So if everybody will actually just say their name and one thyroid toxin that they might know of, let's go across the room here and see what we can sort of pull out and find out what we're going to do. So we'll just start up front here. Radiation. Okay, so just general radiation. Okay, gotcha. This is Chris, by the way. Name? Man, we're being very broad. Let's get something more specific. Okay, pesticides. There we go. I like that one. It's a very good toxin there. Moving on to Alana. PCBs. Okay, even more specific. I like that. Heavy metals. Okay, fantastic. We'll move back to that Alana. Alana in this corner, Alana in that corner. Alana, sorry. Flat A. Stress, very good. I'm glad we kind of brought that up because it's extremely true. Extremely true. Sleep deprivation. Okay, fantastic. You would have said stress too, Phil? I would say some of the water. Okay, pharmaceuticals. So that's a good thing there. Sandra in the back, you recovered? Good. Okay, I'm glad you're feeling better. Hold on. Good. Any addition towards the idea of another thyroid toxin? Okay. All right. Halides. Good one. Fantastic. Question here. Soy is a very big one. One of the unique ones that I think more people don't understand, and the reason why we actually have a regulation against it is BPA. This is one of the most disruptive hormone plastics that we can actually excrete into our body. Interesting part about it is another big factoid to carry away from here. Yes, they have reduced a lot of the use of BPA. They have not actually taken out all of the other BP derivatives that actually go down the list of the 40,000 plastic chemicals that are out there. So when you drink your BPA-free container, don't feel so happy because there's actually 4 or 5 other forms usually of BPA, of BP. I'm sorry, I know, it was great that it happened, but it's the idea of actually giving you a splinter when you've got a wooden pole stuck through your shoulder. Oh, I've got the splinter out. Oh, good job. What are you going to do for the actual large issue that's here? But this is one of those where I like for people to kind of see. Radiation's a big one. There's still big elephant. I don't even know what color he is now because I don't know what toxic levels there are in the Pacific Ocean, but we are dealing with radioactive iodine in our water system, air system, food system. And I agree. We even put in and allow for local water boards to toxify the actual tap water, which goes in through the skin, goes in through your cooking, goes in through what you're drinking. So the concept of have you drink the Kool-Aid is actually almost very true when it comes to thyroid health. Because what I mentioned about the idea of it being sensing, it's registering and passing all of the blood through it every 17 minutes. So anything that's actually toxic to your body is actually being concentrated inside the thyroid gland. So, and it's receiving that information, and that's why we find it's one of the areas, just like the liver, that has an extreme potential for biomagnification or bioaccumulation. So anything you're kind of exposed to in very, very tiny levels, from soy all the way to heavy metals and radiation, It's just going to take a matter of time for it to reach a level where we see true dysfunction occurring. So it's definitely something where I like all those answers and all those great responses. But it brings me to that next sort of question. Um, with the thyroid epidemic that we're experiencing, what does everybody feel, or how do you guys kind of think about the idea of what age does thyroid dysfunction kind of begin? Depends. I exactly feel what you're saying there. Pre-birth, and that's pre-birth. There's a lot of actual details that go into the concept that there's even generational issues here, to where it's something that, as we see epigenetic characteristics occurring, to where a mother and grandmother or great grandmother is typically passing along certain levels of certain vitamins, certain socioeconomic areas have certain malnutrition issues. When we start messing and tampering with the food supply and the water supply, again, one generation picks up 20, 30 years worth, they have offspring, they pick up 20, 30 years worth, they have offspring, and that process just keeps continuing further and further down the line, to where there is definitely a connection here, to where I do say that I think a lot of people are epigenetically precursored to thyroid dysfunction. And then there are those a lot of times that do find that it develops through their own lifetime, and that's one of those big concerns that I have for future generations today. This is something where the thyroid epidemic is just that. It's a last 50 years or so major issue. I think PCBs, DDT, and a few of the other major dioxin, even those compounds that were found inside and introduced by human intervention, are the bigger contributors to this issue. But it is one of those where we let the story kind of be out until we can get a definitive answer. Um, so it's interesting because as we're talking about these disruptors, it's to me very poignant to talk about the different styles of dysfunction. So again, I think most people hear or know about hypothyroidism. That's the one I think everybody at least has heard of the word. It's a part of their family. It's somewhere in their household. And that's one of those to where, again, understanding what's occurring here. It is really just the designation that you are not producing sufficient amount of thyroid stimulating hormone in order to keep your thyroid as active as it should be. That's kind of the basis of understanding here. So it's unique because hypo, obviously, counteracted by a hyperthyroid, you're overstimulating the thyroid and it's producing too much of its hormones. Both of these dysfunctions actually carry different styles of symptoms, and what we find honestly nowadays more often is both occurring in the same body. You'll have a certain portion of cells being hypo and a certain portions of cells being hyper. And so the test results actually for a long period of time will appear very normal, and you actually won't see anything out of the range of levels of the one hormone that they test, and that's thyroid stimulating hormone. That's why this test is actually not the best way of diagnosis, and it's actually given a lot of people false positives as to whether or not they have something and if they should start working on it. If I was able to test everybody today and actually go for not only thyroid stimulating hormone, but the inducting thyroid stimulation, the actual reductive thyroid stimulation, the counter thyroid stimulation, there's actually a laundry list of about 20 to 28 hormones that go into thyroid function. These tell us how and what is really occurring in all those different senses. And that's where you could get on top of a problem that's a very insignificant issue now with a few simple solutions, instead of allowing it to be 10 to 20 years worth of everything's okay because my number is in the range. That's one of those sort of false, honesty things that I really wish we would try to develop away from. So do we get that hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, under, over? These are symptoms that I would say a lot of times are single lifetime. They will start, and you will notice either a myriad of symptoms or none at all. And that's why it's very unique, because you can say, well, that guy's kind of hyper. Maybe he's got a thyroid problem. Or, like this gentleman over here, he's just kept putting on body weight for the last 30 years. Maybe there's, a thyroid issue. You can sort of estimate, but you can never really pinpoint, there being an actual problem. This is a little bit different than when we actually find, with good blood testing, thyroid toxemia. Then we actually get a designation that there's a compound or some sort of particulate that's been accumulated in the thyroid that's actually causing dysfunction to occur. So you got what's called bromonism, which is a very common issue inside most people today because just about 70 years ago, actually, no, I think it's closer to 80 now, they took iodine out of bread, which was very healthy and positive towards the human body. They started the iodinized salt myth, and then they started brominating the bread. And bromine actually destroys and prevents thyroid function of the normal utilization of iodine. So it's very silly that we started a process of, one, not making our own bread. That caused us the biggest problem. And two, we started putting compounds that actually started disrupting. Once we started to move towards city water and water municipalities, they started mixing the same compounds, chloride, bromide, and fluoride into the water, which again disrupt the actual ability to where if there was just a small titration of iodine in the water, we would actually have better health because of it. Cleaner digestive systems, less immune issue. So it's unique that we put a compound like bromine and fluorine and and chlorine in the water that we know is thyroid disruptive. So it is one of those processes that we want to go through to where thyroid toxemia is, to me, 100% reversible, treatable as long as you know what you're doing when it comes to detoxification. So there's a process to go through. See you later, buddy. Have a great one. As we get into things like Graves' disease and Hashimoto's, these are actually long-standing chronic issues with the thyroid. You've been a few decades usually with the problem, or it's just accelerated so rapidly that there's now an issue. Thyroid toxemia a lot of times turns into a Hashimoto's condition because the thyroid cells are now so toxic that the immune system starts to go on the attack and actually will destroy the thyroid cells to prevent you from getting more sick. And that's the sad double-edged sword that the body is put into a situation for understanding. And it's one thing I really want people even to, break your current mold of a lot of times what we call disease is really your body trying to save you. And it's tough when it hurts us, but it's also the trouble and the bother of this whole biomechanical machine is preservation. Just do whatever we can to keep ourselves going. That's the whole game, whatever we can do. So when the thyroid is toxic and nothing's being done to reduce the toxic levels, then the immune system will turn on and do its job. We see a lot of things in goitering as well too before we get to Graves' disease, to where the thyroid will actually swell and the actual gland tries to overproduce with more tissue, and the actual utilization of iodine is taken to a zero. The iodine left in the bloodstream is reduced almost to nothing, and you need iodine in other areas of your body, even though it's mostly critical in the thyroid gland. And this is one of those things where you start to see other body issues occur with Graves' disease as it goes into later stages. So it is one of those unique of interesting issues. Goitering is something that we know very well. Hashimoto's, thyroid toxemia, very, very new. Goitering happens very commonly whenever you just don't have enough iodine in your environment and you're not eating iodine-rich foods. And that's the body's natural response is swell up the thyroid and produce more hormone. And then as soon as you get iodine back in the body, thyroid usually will shrink back down. But when we have these issues and they're long-standing, chronic, then we want to see an overall change occurring back to the body. So as you can see that there's all these little dysfunctions caused by a lot of environmental toxicities, a lot of things that the body's being exposed to. It's also unique because we have functional medicine and really amazing vitamin nutrition to actually start to generate back the operation and the function of the thyroid gland, especially if it's caught in early stages. So it's one of these things to where we can see the importance of the actual systems to where iodine is the simplest solution to everyone's problem out there. And the reason it's not being said for some reason, and everybody knows of iodine as the thing that they use to put on the skin in order to prevent infection, before surgery, and very rarely understand it's the compound that you need inside your body to prevent a lot of this illness. And when it comes to the actual immune function, again, that body's processing the blood every 17 minutes. Every 17 minutes, if you've got adequate iodine, anywhere between 5 to 7 grams of it inside the thyroid, it's cleansing the bloodstream just the same way it's used to cleanse prior to surgery. So that's one of those really interesting, I consider it a very wonderful pre-diagnostic technique. If you're a person who gets a cold, quote unquote, sniffles, sneezes, little slight fever, and it is gone within 24 hours, that means you have adequate iodine and your blood's cleansing itself within just those few cycles of that one day. If you have 3 days to get better, a week, it's been 4 months, you haven't gotten, that's showing you that the iodine concentration that's available is so minimal, it's just not being able to purify the blood excessively. So you can take all the emergency, all the echinacea, all the other stuff you want. If you're missing this one key critical nutrient, then that's where we're actually going to find the roots of the problem. And again, we do see a lot of other sort of concerns, but without proper iodine, this is where we can see thyroid dysfunction at birth. And it can be something that you're seeing pass between mothers to children. And that's one of the biggest concerns in the topic where we're going to be on in a couple weeks, what I call eating for peanuts, all about pregnancy nutrition, because the idea is you got to protect these peanuts because everything you're doing prior to them being around is actually programming their bodies on how their environment and what their situations are. So if you have low iodine, the fetus is going to develop in a low iodine sensing world. So it needs that to be a part of its initial operation after, preconception, and that's the unique thing. It needs to be there before, not the moment you find out. It actually needs to be a part of the process before anything even begins. So when we go through this and understand, we'll get more into that on that other talk. I want to make sure that I talk about it because I think it's the most important piece. A lot of iodine in an improperly functioning body is very difficult to see immediate or even, I would say, long-term results if there isn't the cofactor selenium. And selenium being one of the most amazing materials for actually allowing you to begin to absorb the iodine you're taking in. So I would actually let everybody know that this is something they need to take as a cofactor when they're starting an iodine supplementation system. And if they're experiencing more of the serious chronic illness systems, the thyroid, the true Hashimoto's, thyroid toxemia, Graves' disease, very large goitering, probably need to get selenium in first so that way there's a receptor and the capabilities of even absorbing the actual new iodine that's being introduced to the body. Selenium is an interesting compound because you can't actually take too much of it in a day. You want to stay below about 1,400 micrograms, but the average 4 or 5 Brazil nuts contains about 700 micrograms. So that's the easiest thing to do is put a little bowl on the table right when you walk in the door, have the Brazil nuts available, grab 4 or 5 when you're going out, when you're coming in, whenever you can think about it, but keep yourself in that constant process of absorbing some selenium. We have an actual, beautiful protein powder, not only containing the Brazil nut protein to be able to give you about 750 to 900 micrograms of selenium per day, but also containing things like spirulina and moringa, which are 2 amazing plant proteins to actually reduce inflammation, clean up the gut, and be multifunctional, but very thyroid beneficial. So pristine proteins is one of these amazing materials that I would say everybody who's experiencing any kind of or just concerned about thyroid health to consider that as being a part of your daily operation. Yes, go ahead.
So, what's the optimal level? How many micrograms a day of selenium?
I would say if you're trying to heal, somewhere about 900 or to 1,000 micrograms. You're never going to go over, and you're not going to be creating any body stress, but you're going to be taking an ample amount to see the reserves of selenium, be utilized properly. Again, digestive issues are always one of those to where you want to take enough to where as you're breaking it down, your body's absorbing as much of that as possible. Not doing what's called the standard, RDA or reduced death allowance vitamin levels, because that's what's really there for. They put it at somewhere about 2 to 300. And yes, if you are in perfect health and great selenium concentrations and everything's working in your body, you could probably maintain on a couple hundred micrograms, but most people aren't there. So that's where we see a really big issue occurring. And that's one of those unique things about rebuilding those stores in the body. So selenium working with iodine, you finally have the two pieces of this package to get back to some level of thyroid health. So that's where we want to see the overall beginning stages for you to start taking this home. Yes,
Another question.
of course.
I've heard some people have had trouble with iodine with hypothyroid,
Correct. They will.
and they've been recommended to not take it.
Of course.
Is that because they haven't got the selenium in order first?
It can be that. When we talk about detoxification in a couple here in a couple seconds, we'll go into a little bit deeper on that one. But what you're experiencing for a lot of people is the reason you got into hyperthyroidism as a problem is because your body wasn't processing iodine. So when you start adding it in, especially 25 milligrams or so in like a tablet form of iodoral, which is bonded iodine, technically very low absorption rate, the body doesn't know what to do with it. So we see a big issue. Whereas if you're taking an actual iodide, which is a single iodine -1 compound, then you're getting the highest absorption rate and the best tissue compensation. So your body will start to recognize that you're actually going to see these compounds. If you go to page 3 on the handouts, you can see how the thyroid feedback loop talks about the idea of cellular recognition of thyroid hormone. And that's the same thing inside the thyroid gland that when we talked about our hormones make it happens discussion, it's amazing because your cell actually has to see the iodine in order for it to grab a hold of it and then do something with it inside its complex with that iodine molecule now. So that sensing system is what was not working. So it's really tough on a lot of people's bodies when we already knew that was broken. It wasn't doing its job as function. It's not that you can just shove a whole bunch of iodine in and expect it to work. That's kind of the same system I always see with people who try to prevent anemia by taking extra iron. You've already established that you have a problem processing iron. Shoving more in the body usually just causes dysfunction. It's not going to solve the problem by just filling the void. It's kind of like saying my house is really messy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shove a whole bunch more trash in order to make it clean. Well, no, you've got to process. You've got to get a system in there to where it's actually working again. And I think the biggest thing a lot of people is they jump in thinking that the iodine solution is their solution, and they go really high, really fast. And they think, I want to be done with this. I'm tired of being in this condition. And they don't take the time to be slow. I've worked with people to where literally we're doing 1 ounce of 1 drop of iodine mixed with 10 ounces of water and 1 ounce every hour instead of 1 full drop in 5 ounces at one time. That titration level is really how your body's going to feel. And again, when you get iodine back in the body, the reason they're having this effect and the reason they're told not to is because it does create overstimulation or overproduction, and the rest of the body starts to sense things that it maybe hasn't sensed in years, and that can feel very weird. It goes back to the whole idea that if you like sitting on the couch and someone tells you to get up and do 20 push-ups and then 20 sit-ups and then 20 pull-ups and then 20 like you'll throw up halfway through because you're not used to that function. But if you slowly get into it, you do your own steps, you go at your own pace, we can see good health come back. So that's and we'll talk a little bit more about the actual detoxification process. Very critical to understand now, and I love to go to this next question, the 3 organs or glands that are working, say, with and around the thyroid. Because this is where I think I find the most common misdiagnostics and the most interesting issues inside thyroid healing. Does anybody have an idea the ones that are connected? What's that? Okay, adrenal gland. I like that. I'll say for the moment, yes, but no. Pituitary. Okay, very, very critical. That's on the HPA axis where adrenals are a part of it. Pituitary is actually the main sensing organ that the thyroid is talking to because it's going to produce a majority of the other hormones. Whereas the adrenals kind of gets the rainfall, the down train. It's not that direct one. So pituitary, yes. What's that? Pancreas is down the road. There's one more. It's involved in the process of the conversion of our standard T3, T4 complex. The liver. So very critically controlled and maintained and in a constant symbiotic relationship with the thyroid gland. They are literally talking to each other every second that they're operating. Again, the volume of blood that it takes to go through the thyroid gland every 17 minutes, being kind of tiny and in your throat, it goes through the liver every 30 to 45 minutes. So you're getting the full body filtration of all that material in your blood, and anything that the liver's picking up, it's sending hormones back and actually giving that reverse T3, reverse T4 conversion for the thyroid to pick up the, oh, okay, we'll adjust a little bit of this guy, change this one around. And again, that thyroid's producing all the other cascading enzymes, telling us how to digest our food, telling us whether or not we're actually going to be in a fight or flight response, if we need to kick in the adrenals, which is, again, later down that road. So that third one, though, is, again, you have actually a parathyroid as well, too. You have two glands on the outside of the thyroid that they are sensing and doing a lot of the auxiliary hormone production and the reserve system for a lot of people, to where parathyroid infection from long-standing lymph, throat, ear, sinus infections, and high-level antibiotic use a lot of times shuts down the parathyroid. And it's unique because that cascade actually will then create thyroid shutdown, which will create the overall issue. So most people don't see this connection to the material that's literally right behind. And a lot of times during surgery, they'll actually just cut it all out, not thinking that there's any really interesting issues or dysfunctions that are going to occur later on past thyroid surgery. I have heard a lot of people who are going through partial thyroidectomies, to where they're actually just removing half of a thyroid or a certain area or a tip of a thyroid. But then I hear of just full gutting removal. And again, the thyroid gland is in charge of so much function inside our human body. Once it's not there, it's really tough for the rest of the organs to decide and to figure out how to do what they're doing inside the body. So these organs, and again, so that means if you're a person with compromised liver health, it's going to be tough for you to have a full functioning thyroid. And very rarely do we worry about the liver when we see thyroid issues, and the vice versa. And so it's one of these where I want people to, again, come away from hearing this talk and going, well, hey, I've actually been a thyroid suffering person for a long time. I've never looked at my liver. I've never even thought of that it would actually have, but it is the converting material for all of these thyroid hormones. So definitely a piece in this process. So I jumped ahead and I kind of gave all the answers away. I apologize. So those thyroid hormones, again, are one of those to where when we see these, I'm trying to get people to say three, we have the three known ones. I would say the three big ones because they're tested and we're told and we live by these numbers. And that's the total thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. Is the one that I think most people are familiar with. We have free T3 and free T4. These two compounds are, again, part of the breakdown of all the other thyroid. But you also have thyroid inducing or thyroid stimulating hormone that creates the conduction, creates conversion, and they are circulating throughout the body and being produced, and we can see a cascade of issues occurring. So when we talked about disruptors, we talked about heavy metals, we talked about radiation. So radioactive iodine settling in the thyroid gland will destroy the thyroid gland just by radioactive heat and free radical damage to the direct area. Plastics, pesticides, things of that nature that are inside the bloodstream can actually shut down the rest of the sensing cells. And you could be producing a really adequate amount of thyroid hormone, and none of that communication is going to where it needs to be. Or you could be taking a pill for your pancreas, metformin or something along those lines, and actually disrupting the function of a gland, and your thyroid's supposed to be in control of that. So it thinks, oh, hey, I'm producing too much of this hormone in order to actually get the insulin levels to be raised. The insulin levels are really high already because you're taking a drug that actually puts that in the bloodstream, and so it'll shut itself down. So we see that issue and that relationship again kind of happening, to where this problem solving sort of way of going about using these superfood solutions are really ones that we want to understand. The reason I was talking about the liver is because of the vitamin A and zinc complex as well too. Very critical for people to be understanding their vitamin A levels when it comes to thyroid health. Not that I want everybody here to be taking vitamin A. So understand that high dosing vitamin A can actually cause a lot of problems inside the human body. But I would love for everybody here to be looking at beta carotenes as the precursor to vitamin A, and you're allowing your body's function to actually convert as much as you need. So eating foods that are yellow, orange, red in color, goji berries, astaxanthin, having high amounts, even spirulina, having very high amounts of beta carotene is the correct way to allow your body's assimilation process to produce more vitamin A. And that can actually be a very healthy relationship because you're actually promoting function, not reversing and allowing for dysfunction to be the norm of the system. So that's a huge relationship connection there for a lot of people. Vitamin D3, always critical in human healing. Can't be without it. Get this tested. We did our podcast on Wednesday, and I just know that you should know that number better than you know your phone number, your address, because if you could actually understand your vitamin A conversion factors and how much you have inside your body, or vitamin D, then all human healing will start to occur. There isn't any compound besides magnesium found in more concentration in human cells than vitamin D. So when it's low, we know that that means all the cells are low as well too. And that's one of those unique things to think about when it comes to blood testing. Blood testing only gives us what's actually found in the blood. Unless you do cellular or muscle biopsy and actually cut cells out and then synthesize those down to find out what's inside them, you don't really see the actual relationship as to what's, you can kind of guess high blood volumes, okay levels in the cell, but that's not always true. So again, it's one of these where I really want people to be testing their vitamin D at least on an annual basis. If you're seeing a doctor once a year, just get that tested. If you have to do it for yourself, there are home testing kits, so you can do it in the privacy of your own home. Just takes a little glucose finger prick and you're done. So, and you can find this out and live by it because it will be the thing that I think will actually save a lot of individuals. B vitamins are very critical as well too. Getting a really high quality B complex and using something that's actually a methylated B is so critical in this process because if you already have body dysfunction, you probably have methylation issues. So methylation issues are the absorption factors and the detoxification factors that actually are critical. So if you're not methylating your vitamins, or at least taking things that are methylating cofactors like TMG or MSM, then it's very hard for your body to bring in good nutrition back into the cells. So if you're low on Bs and your body's got dysfunction, it's very tough for someone to take a standard B complex and not see the absorption rates increase inside their bodies and their health change. I'm really big on the concept that if you're taking something, you should kind of feel it. It should do something to where you can notice a change in the body because then you can really tell that, again, even I'm one of those that sometimes negative feeling whatever in the body shows that at least you're having an effect. The idea is this towards the effect we want it to be? So we'll talk about now, which I think is the more critical reason why probably everybody is here listening. How do we start healing? I talked about all these material, how, these types of foods, these supplements, these vitamins. But the healing process is one of those to where it's a very complicated interaction back and forth process. It's probably one of the more difficult uh, things to heal from because you're going to be affected by everything you do, positive or negative. It's interesting because that's the part where I feel for people who are trying to do this on their own and going through this process. But it's definitely something to where I'd rather you be trying and kind of hit and missing on healing than I would you not. But it's definitely one where we want to see people actually doing this in a very controlled way. We talked about the bromine in the bread, right? Bromine in the tap water. One of the big issues is that we switched over to iodinized salt. And the iodinized rock salt process that we did in this country actually created less absorption for iodine. It's not very healthy for us to take the sprayed on iodine chemical that's put onto salt to iodinize it, the way Morton's love to essentially put their packages out. And that's where we started not absorbing iodine and we started taking in a ton of bromine. So we're taking it in the foods, in the water, and one of the easiest ways is to go back to a natural-based crystal salt to actually start the removal process of what's called brominism, or the reduction of bromine inside the bloodstream. Again, when bromine's exiting, the ability for the cells to take in iodine is actually starting to improve. So that's one of these plus and minuses. When it comes to a person who's been told, don't take iodine, it'll hurt your hypothyroidism. I say, great. I don't want to be hypothyroidic. That's the point, is to actually take it away from the body. I don't want it to be comfortable. I don't want it to stick around. I want it to be moving out. But it does affect the system. It does affect the hormones. It affects your mood. It affects your nausea level in your stomach. It can create tremors and shaking and headaches and all these other issues. And that's one of those pieces where I wish that wasn't the case. But be slow with it. And the idea is keep focused on the idea of healing. Salt intake for the average person trying to heal is about half a teaspoon every morning. This will start to create the salt levels and get a high magnesium containing salt versus a rock salt or anything that's iodinized, please. It doesn't have to be Icelandic. We are enjoying the Icelandic because it tastes great and it's actually got a really, really high level of minerals, 84 trace elements, highest magnesium containing material. Watch out for the potassium. But the idea is that you want this instead of any kind of table salt. So half a teaspoon a day can be a tremendous benefit for starting that process of removing the bromine.
You say do it in the morning?
Yeah.
You just put it in water and drink it.
Just put it in water. If you're doing a lemon water, you should be adding salt to that anyways. If you're doing MSM, you should be adding more salt to it anyways. So if you're doing any kind of quick tonic in the morning, just add a half a teaspoon of salt. Again, it's one of those where if you have to and you like really salty eggs, put it on the eggs, put it on butter, put it on whatever. The idea is get more of the really high quality mineral salt back into the system. It's unique though too, because as much as I don't talk about it as being directly a thyroid affecting metal, aluminum is just a general body dysfunction metal. And aluminum is actually replaced in the human body by increasing silica. It's unique because this compound, silica, is actually the inner workings for everything from our connective tissue to the structural lattice of our bones. It's all of the actual skin, hair, nails. It's a part of that process. And so when we have excess aluminum in the body, any place where silica can bond, aluminum can also bond. So when we have a deficiency in silica, we're allowing for the extra intake and absorption of aluminum. So aluminum toxicity is a huge issue, not only from pesticide materials, things that are being sprayed in the air, packaging, just again, one of those where our environment seems to be just soaked in aluminum. And silica induction is the best way of starting to remove that out of the body. So definitely a cofactor in getting body function to start occurring again. Chlorine, fluorine, bromine. I know I kind of talked about the salts. It's interesting because we typically, on a day-to-day basis, we're a showering society, bunch of people. That's what we do. We don't think of our shower as being a place where we can actually get a lot of the toxicity to not only be aerosolized by taking in warm steam baths or warm steam showers, but by actually absorption straight through the skin and being sucked in through the skin pores and absorbed. And once it's in the skin and found to be a toxin, the body's just trying to find a place to put it. So the idea is there's a definite process here. But the more we have a good reliance and dependence on iodine, the less likely you are to absorb those compounds. And if you're using methylating cofactors like TMG and MSM, then they're helping that body detoxify as well. But compounds like our actual detoxify, which is based on citrus modified pectin, this compound is what will actually help the binding of those heavy metals and the excretion of them out of the human body. This isn't the same as doing a cleanse. That's not what we're talking about here. This is actually just putting in a material that selectively likes to uptake, hold onto, or bind and allow you to eliminate any kind of heavy metal, pesticide, VOCs, a lot of radiation compounds. And our detoxified blend is actually designed to help you be more expressive in your cells in order to get rid of those compounds as well too. So things like zeolite, clay powders, diatomaceous earth, charcoal, these are great for compounds that are directly in adjacent connection to the intestines or inside the blood and being filtered out slowly through the intestinal lining. But they're not going to go through like the way that citrus modified pectin is and hunt down compounds in the blood, in the brain, and actually pull them out of the body and for them to be able to be excreted for you to start seeing that. And that's where I think a lot of people, when you talk about the precaution for taking iodine when you have a thyroid dysfunction, is when you start taking the iodine, those bad chemicals and compounds get released and are floating in the bloodstream. So they create a lot of issue. So without a binder to actually help your body absorb that and control the release of it, then this is where you start to have muscle aches, fatigue, cramping, things of that nature that actually start to make the whole process of getting your body clean and healthy start to feel like it's not the right decision. Um, but there is a way of getting around that. There is a way of going through it. So I highly recommend for people to start. Just start. That's the most important piece.
When you say start slow,
Correct.
but what do you mean by start slow?
Starting slow. It can be the idea of taking one drop in 8 to 10 ounces of water and drinking that first thing in the morning, and again, seeing how your body responds. If that's too intense, then the idea is take that 8 to 10 ounces and break it apart into 1 or 2 ounce drinks throughout the entire day. And you can start to sense or feel what's actually going to work for your body. So this is a unique relationship, because you're the only person who knows you, and you're the only person that's going to be able to say, oh, I took that one drop and I placed it in the water and I drank it and I felt no change. Okay, great. That means your body is actually absorbing or utilizing without any issues or other dysfunctions that one drop. I like for people to start off their first 30 days using just one drop if that's where their body's process is. If one drop creates sweating, shortness in breath, any kind of skin sort of, tremoring, or any kind of like thymus activation, hot flashing, just anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, the idea is to cut it down. And it could be the fact that maybe at first you don't even really take in any of your iodine in concentration, because one drop of this is 1,200% of what you're supposed to be getting according to the government's RDA. You could just be the person who needs to start eating a few red walnuts on the routine and getting just a small titration of iodine from food first. Nothing too concentrated, but just making it be present. So get that mixture of Brazil nuts and throw in half a bag of red walnuts with it the same. Make sure you're eating all the outside skin. You've got all that good coloration. I used to be a person who recommended seaweeds and seafoods and things like that. Pacific Ocean die-off and toxicity, I kind of can't anymore with good heart. It's tough. If you have a really clean source of really good iodine-containing seaweeds that are from Antarctica, someplace a little bit more pristine, then sure, go right ahead. It's hard to trust. I don't even trust the East Coast anymore. Anything Northern Hemisphere, gone. Just don't do it. It's one of those where I'd hate for you to be a person thinking you're starting to become healthy by taking in radioactive containing seaweeds.
But at the same time, with the hot flashes with the sweats,
Uh-huh.
I get that when I eat.
Yeah, well, that's a slight raise in temperature, and it's controlled. This is you drink the iodine, and literally you're like, everything just happens. Like it's a very instant reaction, and your body's saying, hey, that's because if you had a dial here that you could see, go, oh, you went from 0 to 100 in 3 seconds after drinking the iodine.
What is too much?
Because you're technically creating hyperthyroidism, and we don't want to do that. That's just as stressful as having a body that's actually lacking thyroid function. So we want to know where that body is, and the idea is to be taking some amount. Ask me, give personal questions. Tell me what you're planning on doing for yourself. Consult somebody to actually work through this process. I myself take about 27 to 29 drops a day of this particular material. My body actually does pretty well. Push it to 30, 31, and it kind of creates a little bit of weirdness. But everybody has their own leveling, their own dosing that goes in for their own system. So we're just trying to work with that. Okay.
When you're eating nuts, should you soak them first?
Depends on other body issues. If you've got major sensitivities in the colon, if you've got any kind of IBS condition, if you're just taking really low quality nuts that are not processed at a very conscious facility to where they could have a ton of extra dust or heavy metal pollutions and things like that are coming into the contact, yes. I personally don't have a problem. So I would say for me, no big deal. I can eat nuts, doesn't matter where they come from. I still try to get raw quality, really, and I try to select good, but I'm not looking at a bowl of nuts as if there's going to be major issues occurring to my body from eating anything that might be in there. But it is one of those to where a lot of people, it helps. It helps the actual breakdown. It helps them not be so stomach irritating, creating any kind of acid reflux. So and it does decrease certain compounds that are some people are extremely sensitive to. So that's a find out what works best for you. If you are reactive to certain nuts, soak them, see how that works. You might not be able to eat that particular variety or type of nut if you've got an allergy to it. So there could be some other immune issue or gut dysfunction on top that I would say maybe nuts aren't going to be the way to go. But there are foods that are not seaweed or walnuts that I know of off the top of my head that actually have some iodine in them. So certain seafoods, again, it's tough to recommend seafood, but certain seafoods have good quality iodine in them. There are other herbs and other plants that actually have really like thick, dark colored outer skins, especially a lot of times have some iodine in them. It's just, again, how much do you have to eat in order to make it functional? But if that's all you can do to start there.
And again, so when you start doing this, it could create a hypothyroidism.
Hyper could speed it up.
Would it ever create a hypo?
I can't imagine it would create hypo unless you had the alternative sort of liver dysfunction issues as well too, that would actually be sending in improper levels of converted T3, T4, shutting the thyroid down. So that's one of those where those two organs have to be treated almost at the same time in the same way. So liver cleansing and detoxifying the thyroid kind of have to happen simultaneously a lot of times. And that's where we'll start to see better function in both organs and better communication between the two, to where you'll see the light on the end of the tunnel, and there'll be actually big benefits on actually getting through those issues. So yeah, there is. I not very often would I say that if you add the components that actually increase function, do you see hypoactivity? Not often. More to the other side. So, and that's one of those where normal function in a hypothyroidic person is technically hyperthyroidism. And so the response and the symptoms are a lot of times very the same. So we see a lot of that issue. Eating for thyroid health is one of those where it's complicated in a way because anything stressing the body is going to stress the thyroid. So you don't want to be taking in, if you have reactivity to dairy or gluten or anything other that creates an allergenic effect, because that's going to ramp up the actual speed of your thyroid to try to counteract it. So if again, we mentioned stress as being a thyroid toxin. It's exactly true because of all of the hormone that gets produced outside of the body, outside of the thyroid, that the body now has to deal with, from adrenaline all the way through to norepinephrine, histamines. All of those can still create thyroid overstimulation or understimulation. So that's where happiness is actually the best thing a person with hypothyroidism can do for themselves. It's hard to get there, to get to that point of contentment, but that's a big piece in this. But eating for thyroid health a lot of times is a big step to where we are removing what's called a goitrogen and goitrogenic substances that actually will spur on swelling or overstimulation of the thyroid. Again, that's one of the things we want to be very protective. A lot of times we see goitrogens being included as everything from broccoli to kale. The unique thing is a lot of times, even though there are goitrogenic substances in these foods, they are very low in their concentration, and the health benefits of taking in cruciferous vegetables and good healthy kale, cabbage, for the sulfur levels are actually beneficial for the body. So yes, there are tiny amounts, and you might be hypersensitive to that. That's not what I'm saying. Even sprouted foods, a lot of times, because of the concentration of these goitrogens, can be too much for the body. But it's also, to me, a really good measurement on how well your body's processing. If at one point in time in your life you're not able to eat these foods because you flare up, your skin goes, something happens, and we start to heal the thyroid, and you go and you try a bite of broccoli and it doesn't do anything but just make you feel good, then the idea is you've actually improved your body's response system. Maca is one of the few compounds that we actually have as a health food over here. That is actually in its raw form a very high goitrogenic substance. So it can become an issue for people. So we have switched over, like I say, to the gelatinized, where it's actually gone through a heating and a cooking process to reduce that. Steaming your vegetables does reduce a lot of the goitrogenic issues. Sprouting your seeds, washing the actual nuts, things of that nature, soaking will help that process along. Um, so there is, compounds that we need to be aware of. All of the nightshades are definitely something where I would say remove those entirely. Even if your body isn't showing you a reaction, there's still internal inflammation that's being occurring by eating potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, lots of different styles of pepper, that you need to try to kind of remove those. And again, just for the time period where you're trying to heal. If you are an absolute diehard fan of eggplant, and that's like your main go-to vegetable, just take it out for a while. You might actually find that all of a sudden you feel amazing if it's been something you've been doing forever and don't know why you feel so crummy. That's one of those big things too, is be very flexible with your diet during a time of trying to heal, especially the thyroid. The thyroid medication system that's out there, the comment that I have for it is there is never been a case, as far as I understand, to where someone has been taking thyroid medicine and actually become healed of hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, or any kind of other dysfunction. So there is no true solution in that. That's the game that I'm sort of presenting in front of everybody here. There's the path of trying to heal it. Could be bumpy, could cause a lot of issues. There's the actual medication system. And if you've had the thyroid removed, then you're right. There's really not much of an other idea that I have, except for your body will try to balance it as best as it possibly can. It'll do the best job it can. A lot of the fat cells in the body, can't even think of the word, which is kind of sad. But anyhow, they will take over the function of hormone production. They will try, which is a lot of times where we see people who have their thyroid removed, we see an increase in body weight follow right afterwards. So as those fat cells try to produce excess hormone, they will try to stimulate the body in the best way it can. Again, not the best solution system, but the body's trying. Yes? What? An autoimmune response of your own cells to toxic thyroid cells, the toxic thyroid gland. So your body is rejecting the actual cells and a lot of times destroying them and removing them from their function. Same thing like when we see overproduction inside the pancreas to the point to where your blood is so full of insulin that your body will shut off the pancreas. And it will kill the cells and destroy the function in order to not allow for excess of insulin. Again, it's just a homeostasis game. Hashimoto's a lot of times is what people will always say is a genetic issue, because that's what, I don't have anything but precursors or other people in the family line. Again, epigenetically, yes, your body is leaning that direction, but if you pull back hard enough, I use the example of a downed apple tree in a windstorm. It gets uprooted and it's still sitting there with half of its root system in the ground. You slowly bring it back with bracers to kind of allow it to start to grow in the proper direct direction, straight up. But it's a process to actually to bend that tree back to where it's in its normal position, upright, fully functional. So yes, you can get knocked down. Yes, you can have dysfunction. As long as it's still connected to your body can try to heal certain things. Did that?
You've been taking medication, thyroid medication, for over 30 years. Can you stop?
Of course. Eventually, not right at once today or anything of that nature. The idea is you want to see function come back and the actual disruption in the actual blood panel for the testing to show that your thyroid's trying to be active. Very slow. Yes. Again, 30 years of non-function and medication of suppression means you have to unravel that whole ball in order to get it to where, but it is possible. And it is something that I, again, love for people to start working on to get their body back into better health.
So that's kind of along the lines of what I was going to ask for those people who are on the medication.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any guidance as to their path? Is it a little bit slower? Is it
definitely slower, because the actual bloodstream values are being kept at a very constant level by you taking the pill that you take every single day. Understand that's not how the thyroid operates. It's not how it naturally works. And a lot of times you're over medicating in order to give yourself some sort of balance in the bloodstream. But your body actually, when you wake up, will have a thyroid boost. You'll actually eat food and your thyroid will adjust. You'll go to work and get stressed by your boss and have your thyroid adjust. You'll go in for lunch and have traffic and your thyroid's always moving up and down and creating body's balance and operation. So when you've been on a pill that keeps you at flatline the whole time, then your body doesn't understand the thyroid anymore for what it's doing by now being variable. And that's where you start slowly with the detoxification process, with the actual nutrification process, get function back in to where what will happen for a lot of people is they'll go into their doctor's office and the blood test will come back as their thyroid's a little bit elevated. Something's going on. What have you been doing? Oh, I've been taking iodine. I've been trying to detox. I've been, pulling stuff out. Oh, don't do that because now your values are moving. Well, okay, that's kind of what the gland is supposed to do. That's where we see a lot of the medical issue out there is that it's better to keep you lacking function and on the medicine than it is to give you back function because that means you're uncontrolled and then your body has to be adjusted for and watched more carefully. You have to be your own health advocate at this stage. It's I don't know because again the idea is they work on the premise of your best interest, and there's some truth to that, but the idea is it goes a little bit beyond, and especially when you're given a choice. Oh, we see a little bit of disruption in your thyroid. Oh, we'll just put you on the medicine anyways. Why? That's almost like preventative birth control, where we use it for other symptoms that aren't connected to that. So it's big in this whole process. Again, I think after all of saying all of this stuff, the idea for tonight, for everybody, for anybody catching this online, for watching later, is you can get something to start working for you and get your body back under your own control. You can. It's tough to believe that when especially you've had years of everything saying no you can't, when everybody even around you, societal wise, support groups are telling you nope, not happening. You can do this. It's not easy, but the documentation is starting. People are starting to do this process. People are starting to rid their body of their toxins that are actually creating the dysfunction in the first place. They're starting to nutrify their system to epigenetically turn back on function and recognition of their body. So it is something where I just want everybody to know there is that hope if you have to hold hope first and then start to change things, but go slow, talk to somebody, work with somebody, understand this system, this process is a very natural process. It's not an overnight solution, but it is one of those to where it's worth it to me. If I was suffering from this and dealing with this type of condition, I would be doing anything and everything I possibly could to find a way out, because there's just not, to me, that quality of life that I'm expecting for myself inside the actual pharmaceutical system. So, any questions? Well, yes.
How does, when you start, if you've been hypothyroid on medication for many years,
Mhm.
you start introducing the iodine in,
Mhm.
how does it affect the three hormones
Mhm.
that are operative in the thyroid?
Right.
And then what is the liver thinking about all this?
So first and foremost, what happens is you'll probably see an increase in thyroid stimulating hormone. So your thyroid becomes more active, which means it's producing more T3, T4. Your liver will start to register additional thyroid hormone and start to convert and do the free T3, T4 conversion. This process, again, even in the bloodstream, your liver is going to finally pick up that there's iodine in the blood. If you've been so without iodine, it's finally going to be in the serum. And your body will actually start to cleanse itself. And one of the big things we see a lot of times that's coinciding with Hashimoto's and all the other sort of dysfunctions is growth in parasites, molds, bacteria, and things of those other parts because the body's not being cleansed properly. So these guys all get to proliferate themselves. And to be quite honest, your body will try to live with as much parasite, mold, fungus as it possibly can before you start to see issues in other parts of the body. The unique thing for me is that at first, when you start to kill off mold, it's going to literally it it changes the way you think. Mold has a very interesting energy, and you can see this in a lot of the very interesting Carillion photography. It almost looks like a black hole. It literally has this depressive, light absorbing, sucking sort of like image that actually appears. And it's honestly, when you get it and you see mold doing its job, that's what it does. It's how it's supposed to work. But when it's in the human body and you've been living with that for such a long time, and you remove it, it's almost as disconcerting as losing a loved one or having some sort of major trauma occur to the body, because now the body has to reconfigure. And this is very common in anybody who's done candida cleansing, done sugar reduction, caffeine reduction. The sort of Herkmeister healing crisis occurs, and your body actually freaks out over being healthy. Like, that's one of those unique systems where we really want everybody to understand that's kind of part of the process. You've been living in an area where, person B is actually extremely unhealthy, and now you finally move them over to normal, and normal feels so weird that you'd rather go back to person B, which that's never going to provide anything. The point is to get through that transition and go over to person A, where you finally have health and homeostasis and balance and everything's working. But you've got to go through that process. So it's interesting because I still think everybody needs to come away from this talk tonight. Start slow, selenium first sometimes, edible forms of iodine before you take high doses and concentrations, detoxing, working on your actual existing diet, removing things that we've talked about that we know are causing problems. If you're the type of person who eats a lot of canned food, drinks from cans of Diet Coke, plastic bottles, all of these things, you're eating a bunch of soy product, you are hanging out near Fukushima power plant, swimming on the afternoon, whatever it might be that you're doing, stop doing that first, and that can have you actually healing and feeling a lot better. Then we can get to those other functions, those other issues. And like I say, with Hashimoto's, with thyroid dysfunction, there's usually a lot of other systems involved. And so it's really hard when someone wants to fix just one thing. When we're not saying, oh, we are changing something over here and the adrenals fail, or we get major stomach disruption and no appetite, or the mood is just up and down and affecting. Those are, it's almost par for the course. That's one of those things. But bumpy road, it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Get yourself back into good health. So no more questions this evening. If there's anything personal that you guys want to ask afterwards, just please come and see me. If you're catching this online, YouTube or Facebook, feel free to drop some comments in there. Again, that code, as I was perfectly informed, is SMART10, S-M-A-R-T, the number 10, all caps, in order to get 10% discount on anything you're picking up off the website. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming this evening. I hope you learned more than enough. And if there are any questions, feel free, just let me know. So always here and available. You can find us online at rawrevelations.com, or you can email me at rrsuperfoods.com. I look forward to hearing from as many people as possible, and keep your thyroids healthy and happy. Yep, Smart 10. So
When you send out that blurb so we can watch you on every time I've clicked on it, which is 3 of them, they super speed, they're like fast.
It's an issue in the version of it's it's hyper information. That's what it is. It's your computer's either Java or Adobe Apple needs to be updated. So if you right click and go to settings and do update, the next time you go and try to watch, it should let you update your version, and that's the one solution they kind of gave me. We took care of it on our part in terms of what they were recording the speed as, because we were recording in double speed, and then people were getting like triple and even worse. Like it was, an hour would go by in less than a minute. And so I think we're balanced now, and I've been checking. Mike's been checking when we do the recordings and the postings, to where hopefully it's back to normal. But check your browser, right click, do the settings, see if there's an update. That can help. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.